Welcome to the intervention video for Concept 1.1. This was week 1 of our patient studies. Today we're going to be looking at absolute value. Just a quick reminder, these videos are the correction tools for the problems that you use to practice before you can take an intervention test. So unless you correct those problems, get a copy from Mr. Willmarth or Mr. Christman and correct them, unless you do that, then you can't take the test. And that's the reason for that is simply that there's no reason to think without some extra practice that you're suddenly going to understand this. All right, here we go. Absolute value. So the concept of absolute value, that's what we're studying right now. The concept of absolute value measures a number's distance from 0 on a number line. It's actually measurement without worrying about positives or negatives. So let's start by looking at the definition. We're going to go out of order here during this video. So absolute value measures a number's distance from 0 on a number line. It tells us how far a number is away from 0. Since it measures distance, absolute value is always positive because it measures distance and distance is always positive. You can't have negative distance. Think of the length of a box. You can't have a negative length on the side of a box, and that's the distance between one end of the box and the other end. Or the classroom that you take your math lessons in. If you look at the distance from the back wall to the front wall, there's no way that it could be negative. So let's move next to this first problem. And it's always important when you're taking a problem, it's always important to know what is it that they want you to do. So in this one, they want you to put the numbers in order from least to greatest. To do that, we need to know the absolute value of each number. So we think about -9 and we think about this definition. How far is -9 away from 0? -9 is 9 spaces away from 0. Positive 15, 15 spaces from 0. -6, 6 spaces from 0. -52 is 52 spaces from 0. Let's jump over for just a moment to the example, and we're actually going to put one of these in our example. So here's a number line. There's 0. Let me get my number line up just a little bit so I can write on it. So there's 0, and let's put the negatives in. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, extend this just a little bit, -6. The positives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Number line goes on forever. That's why we put the arrows on it. So when we look at -6, we say that -6 has an absolute value of 6 because it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces away from 0. Is there another number 6 spaces away from 0? You bet there is. Positive 6. It also has an absolute value of 6 because it is also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces away from 0. So that's how we calculate absolute value. And that's why in this first problem, the absolute value of -6 is our smallest number. It has the least value of our group. The next least value is the absolute value of -9. Then the absolute value of positive 15. And finally, the biggest number is the absolute value of -52 because it's 52 spaces away from 0. So there's the first part of this page. You had some problems on the bottom also. Maybe you weren't sure about those problems when you did this, but now you're thinking, oh, I get this. I understand how to do this. That's fantastic. So pause the video and rework those problems. Or if you left them blank, work them for the first time. Remember, you're in control here of the speed at which you do this review. All right, let's continue. So now we're looking at two types of problems here. We're looking at a compare problem, and again, we're looking at a definition diagram problem. You'll notice, let's just go back up for a moment. You'll notice what I used here is really a combination of an example and a diagram. And if you use example and diagram for either one, then you'll receive credit for that. So let's start with the diagram before we move over to the compare. So our diagram for this one, I'm going to make a shorter number line this time. And my diagram is going to show how negative 2 and positive 2 both have the same absolute value. My diagram is going to show that negative 2 is 2 spaces from 0, so it has a value of 2. Positive 2 is also 2 spaces from 0, so it also has a value of positive 2. So absolute value of negative 2, absolute value of positive 2, both equal 2. Finally, the comparing. So they're asking you to use 3 different symbols. They're asking you to use the greater than. And I would suggest that if you are not sure about these, that you write them down on your paper as soon as you receive your paper. The less than, or the equal to. And you're asked to use those symbols to compare these values. What I find most useful is to go through, and before I do one of these comparisons, to actually figure out what is the absolute value of negative 5. So I don't accidentally just see the negative 5 and say, oh, that's less than 4. So the absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5, and 5 is greater than 4. The absolute value of negative 6 is positive 6. 6 is greater than 3. The absolute value of 13 is 13. 13 is greater than negative 5. Now, this is a little bit tricky, so you probably got this right, but just in case, really listen closely. So this time we're looking at the opposite. Whenever we see a negative outside, we say the opposite of the absolute value of 6. So I know that the absolute value of 6 is 6, and then I need to bring down that opposite sign. So now I have negative 6 compared to negative 6, and that will be equal to. Okay, remember you can always rewatch all or part of the video. As soon as you feel confident, ready to take the test, let Mr. Willmarth or Mr. Christman know. Remember, if you finish the video and you still have a few questions, you can ask your teachers or find one of your friends who understands this concept and ask them for a little help. Buy them a donut or something to teach you absolute value. It's the best donut you'll ever spend. All right, whenever you're ready, talk to your teachers about getting stamped to come in during SSR to take your intervention test. Good luck.